Shy girl humiliated, but her hidden royal family shocked everyone. Claire Matthews had always lived on the edge of the world around her, as if she were a ghost some people only glimpsed when the light caught her just right. At 17, she was the quintessential shy girl, the quiet shadow that hovered at the back of classrooms, the soft voice barely heard when she spoke. Jefferson High School was a small institution packed with the typical teenage chaos, cliques dividing the hallways like territorial lines, gossip bubbling up and settling before moving on to the next rumor. In that atmosphere, Claire's timid nature made her invisible in all the wrong ways. She didn't volunteer in class, didn't raise her hand with bold ideas, and when paired for projects, she was the one who often ended up doing the work without much recognition. Her peers dismissed her awkwardness as indifference or worse, weakness. It wasn't that Claire didn't want to connect. She silently yearned for friendship, for someone to look beyond her reserved smile and quirks. But it seemed as if each gesture of kindness she made was ignored, or sometimes met with a slight smirk or awkward silence. At lunchtime, the noise and clatter of gossip and laughter swirled around a territory she never dared to cross. The popular kids, led by Madison Harper, ruled this social hierarchy with unspoken authority, and Claire was their favorite target. Madison was everything Claire was not: confident, loud, magnetic, and she thrived on the power her popularity gave her. To Madison, Claire's quiet demeanor was an open invitation for mockery, a living gag in the school's endless comedy. Madison's clique whispered cruel jokes behind Claire's back, snatched her books, and spread stories that painted Claire as weird and out of touch. Claire tried to blend into the background, but her difference made her stand out like a sore thumb. Her voice was soft, almost melodious, yet it was enough for the students to poke fun at her when she spoke. She wished she could scream, run away, or be invisible altogether. The halls of Jefferson High felt like a battleground where she constantly fought invisibility and humiliation. One event marked the low point of this ongoing ordeal, the annual talent show. It was the night when the entire school gathered in the cramped but noisy gymnasium, eyes glittering with anticipation. Most students took the stage to flaunt their gifts, whether singing, dancing, or reciting poetry. Claire had registered to sing, though with shaky hands and a pounding heart, she barely believed she could manage it. Singing was her secret solace, the thing that made her feel something beyond silence and shyness. But when the bright spotlight hit her, all those feelings of insecurity returned with full force. Her knees trembled, her voice quivered at first, but she pulled herself together and sang a heartfelt song, carefully practiced in private. For a moment, a hush spread through the room as her gentle voice floated, fragile yet sincere. That fragile respect, however, was shattered in seconds. Madison Harper wasn't about to let Claire have even one moment of peace. From the wings of the stage, with a cruel smile barely contained, Madison shoved the stack of music sheets the accompanist needed, a deliberate sabotage. The pianist, caught off guard, stumbled and fumbled the notes. The music fell apart, just as Claire's voice soared, turning her beautiful song into a messy, broken performance. Laughter erupted instantly from the crowd, cruel and loud. Madison's circle cheered the mockery, their eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Claire's face burned with embarrassment. Tears welled up, blurring the gymnasium's lights as the laughter rolled over her like waves. Humiliated beyond words, Claire fled the stage, barely able to breathe. She didn't look back as she rushed through the crowded hallways. Every pair of eyes seemed to pierce her like daggers. That moment branded her in front of the school. She was now undeniably the girl to be mocked, the outcast with a trembling voice and no place to hide. The days that followed dug a deep pit of loneliness around her soul. Even the few classmates who'd awkwardly offered friendship felt too intimidated to approach after the spectacle. Every glance at her was a reminder of her public shame. But buried beneath that shame was a flicker, a tiny spark of something more. The faint possibility that this was not the end of her story, but somehow the beginning of a deeper path. As she sat in her quiet room one evening, staring out the window into the velvet darkness sprinkled with stars, Claire wondered silently if anyone had truly noticed her, and whether anyone could. Stories like this often begin with an act of cruelty so profound it shapes a life's course. But what if that moment was just a stepping stone toward something greater? What would you do if everything you thought of yourself shattered overnight, only to reveal a hidden truth? Claire's journey was about to begin, and no one at Jefferson High could have guessed the shock that awaited them all. Have you ever felt invisible to the world, waiting for a sign that you mattered? Sometimes the most unassuming people hide the strongest stories within. The days after the talent show were a blur of whispers and pointed looks that seemed to chase Claire wherever she went. In the quiet halls and empty corners of Jefferson High, she became a ghost, more than ever, a presence felt, but never welcomed. The sting of Madison Harper's public humiliation clung to her like a second skin. Each morning, getting out of bed felt like wading through heavy fog. Every classroom seat seemed colder, every glance sharper. Her breathing tightened when she imagined walking past Madison's smug smirk, or hearing the snickers that echoed behind her back. The loneliness bore down on her relentlessly, pressing deep into her chest, making her question everything about herself. She retreated even further into silence, avoiding eye contact, barely answering when spoken to, slipping through the school day unnoticed. It wasn't that Claire lacked courage. On the contrary, beneath her soft-spoken exterior was a well of bravery she hadn't yet learned to draw upon, but the overwhelming tides of mockery and exclusion had drowned out that voice inside her. She wondered if she would ever be seen as more than the shy girl who stuttered on stage and fled in tears. Her mother noticed the change immediately. In their little home at the edge of town, the air seemed heavier, the quiet more oppressive. Claire's spark had dimmed, no more humming while doing the dishes, no more tentative attempts to share small dreams about college or the future. Sitting across from her at the kitchen table one evening, her mother's eyes were warm, but filled with concern. "Claire, honey, you don't have to carry all of this alone. There's more to you than they see," she said softly, reaching out to squeeze Claire's hand. Claire wanted to believe her mother, but how could she, when the mirror reflected only the same shy, awkward girl? The words were a balm, yes, but also a reminder of the storm she couldn't seem to weather. And yet somewhere deep down, a fragile seed of hope stirred, a hint that things might not always be this way. One afternoon, during a slow, restless weekend, Claire heard a knock at the door. Peeking through the window, she saw a man in a tailored suit, his posture dignified yet gentle. He introduced himself with a quiet authority as a dignitary named Victor Lemoyne, from a small European country Claire had only read about in history books. His eyes held a seriousness that demanded attention. With genuine kindness, he explained that he came with important news, a secret tied deeply to Claire's family history. Skepticism overwhelmed Claire. Royalty, hidden lineage. It sounded like a fairy tale, a story too grand for a girl who'd barely survived a single school talent show. Yet, Victor spoke with such certainty and detail that it was impossible to dismiss. According to him, Claire was the last living heir of an ancient royal family, displaced years ago due to political upheaval. The documents he presented, the faded photographs, the official seals, all confirmed what felt like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Claire's world, once defined by loneliness and humiliation, was suddenly disrupted with the gravity of an unimaginable truth. The calm life of a shy American teenager was intertwined with centuries of royal history, hidden from her, until now. The revelation unsettled her. How could she reconcile the invisible outsider she had been with the identity being unveiled? The responsibilities, the expectations, even the hint of power that came with her birthright felt overwhelming. Would accepting this truth change everything? Would the same students who had mocked her care now, or would they see this only as more reason to isolate her? She wrestled with the fear of the unknown, but also an undeniable curiosity, and perhaps a sliver of hope. Victor wasn't just a messenger. He became a guide, helping Claire explore the history and culture bound to her heritage. In the privacy of their home, he handed her old books, maps, letters written by ancestors, each page awakening something stifled within her for so long. Claire's curiosity grew into determination. She was not just the shy girl in the school corridors. She was part of something extraordinary. Yet this journey wasn't simple. The more she learned, the more she realized that embracing her royal lineage came with complicated emotions. Could she live up to these expectations? Was she ready to carry a legacy so profound when even the simple act of walking to class uncovered deep wounds? The balance between her everyday life and this newfound identity created a tangle of hope and hesitation. Still, Claire began to change. Without so many words, her posture straightened, her gaze steadied, and her voice, though still soft, carried an edge of newfound strength. In the solitude of her room, she practiced speeches, imagined meetings she might have one day. Though hidden from her classmates, a quiet transformation was underway. She understood that her identity had layers, both the shy girl who had suffered and the royal heir who could rise above her pain. Though still hesitant, Claire started to dream differently. What if this secret gave her the power to rewrite her story, to reclaim pride and dignity? She wasn't simply the target of ridicule anymore. She was something much more. While she wrestled with these feelings, Madison Harper continued her reign at Jefferson High, unaware that the foundation of her dominance was about to shake. Would Madison and the clique still wield their power when Claire no longer fit the role they'd cast her in? And what of the other students? Could they reconcile the girl they ignored with the figure who might soon command respect? Claire's world was shifting on its axis, but the question remained: would she find the courage to stand in that new light when the moment came? The answer lay just ahead, hidden behind the fear and doubt, waiting for her to embrace it fully. Have you ever had to choose between holding on to the safety of who you've always been and stepping into a new, unfamiliar version of yourself? Claire's journey challenged that very dilemma and invited her to soar from the shadows at last. With each passing day, Claire's quiet metamorphosis became impossible to conceal. Though she maintained her reserved exterior at school, within the walls of her home, and in the company of Victor, she was growing fiercely determined. The weight of centuries-old traditions and responsibilities pressed upon her, yet they fueled a resolve Claire had never known she possessed. She began mastering the refined etiquette of her lineage, posture, speech, grace, and studied the history of her ancestors with an intensity born from a longing to belong to something greater than herself. The shy girl who once trembled on stage was now building a foundation of strength beneath her skin, one slow but deliberate step at a time. But transformation was never without resistance. Madison Harper and her clique, far from relinquishing their power so easily, escalated their cruelty once whispers of Claire's heritage leaked into the school corridors. Gossip twisted facts into spectacle. "Claire Matthews claims she's royalty now," they sneered, and with that the ridicule deepened into venomous mockery. Madison's eyes gleamed with a mixture of disbelief and fury, her dominance challenged by a girl she deemed beneath her. The more Claire grew, the more ruthless Madison's attacks became. From whispered rumors to outright sabotage of school projects, the battle lines between them hardened. Despite the emotional toll, Claire refused to crumble. She found an unlikely ally in Ms. Reynolds, the gentle English teacher who noticed Claire's changing spirit. "You have a rare strength," Miss Reynolds said once, her voice steady but warm, "not just in your heritage, but in your heart." Such encouragement, simple yet profound, became a lifeline as Claire navigated the minefield between her old life and the new identity taking shape. The next major school event arrived swiftly, the annual Winter Gala, a night where Jefferson High's shining stars wore their confidence like armor. Claire entered the grand hall with quiet dignity, every eye drawn involuntarily to the girl who now carried herself with the poise of someone who knew her worth. The murmurs rippled through the crowd as she approached the microphone to address the gathering. The contrast between the trembling girl of months ago and the poised young woman standing now was undeniable. With a voice clear and steady, Claire revealed her secret, the truth of her royal lineage, the history that had shaped her, and most importantly, the resilience forged through years of silence and scorn. The auditorium hung on every word, breaths held collectively in anticipation. Madison's face blanched, her smug smile cracking like fragile glass under the weight of the revelation. The students who had mocked Claire were suddenly silenced, the tables of social hierarchy overturning in a dizzying, stunning twist. The hall erupted, but not with laughter. Instead, whispers transformed into stunned gasps, then into applause that rippled outward, spreading like wildfire. Cameras flashed as local media, tipped off by this unexpected story, filled the space to capture every moment. Claire's announcement was no longer just a personal revelation. It was a public declaration that reshaped the town's perception. Madison's composure shattered first. Her usual bravado gave way to confusion and anger, a desperate attempt to reclaim control that only exposed her insecurity. Friends in her clique exchanged uncertain glances, their roles in the social theater suddenly ambiguous. The girl who had once been the queen of Jefferson High's social scene was now faced with the undeniable truth that her cruelty had not broken Claire, but had pushed her to rise. In those moments, Claire's once hidden strength radiated unmistakably. The shy girl who had disappeared into the shadows was gone. In her place stood a young woman who commanded respect, not through domination or arrogance, but through grace, truth, and unwavering dignity. Yet just as the immediate victory seemed complete, a storm of questions swirled beneath the surface. How would the town accept this young royal amidst their ordinary lives? Could Claire balance her heritage with her everyday existence? Would Madison seek meaningful redemption or plot further destruction out of spite? And perhaps most deeply, could Claire herself fully embrace her newfound identity without losing the essence of the girl she had always been? The days following the revelation were a tempest. The school's hallways buzzed with excitement, envy, and confusion. Local news vans arrived to capture interviews and stories. Friends and strangers alike sought Claire, intrigued and inspired by her courage. Yet behind the public spotlight, Claire wrestled with the enormous shift she had begun. Every beam of media attention was a double-edged sword, reminding her how fragile the ground beneath her still was. Late one night, as the town slept under soft blankets of snow, Claire sat alone, scrolling through supportive messages flooded on her phone, but also reading cruel comments from anonymous strangers. The duality of adoration and harassment stung sharply, but in her heart, that spark Victor had reignited blazed brighter than ever. She was not defined by pain, nor dictated by fear. The hidden royal blood in her veins was not just a title. It was a symbol of endurance, a legacy of surviving upheaval and reclaiming dignity. Claire understood now that the true nobility lay not in crowns or kingdoms, but in rising beyond the chains others try to place on us. Her story had become a beacon, not just of royal lineage, but of personal triumph against humiliation and exclusion. She recognized that this was just the beginning of an unprecedented chapter, one that would test her resolve in ways she could only imagine. And as the snow gently continued to fall outside, Claire made a quiet promise to herself. She would face whatever came next with courage and grace, turning every whisper of doubt into a roar of determination. Have you ever faced a moment when everything you believed about yourself was challenged, when the world shifted suddenly beneath your feet? Sometimes it's in that very storm that the greatest revelations are found, waiting to transform the way we see ourselves and others. The weeks that followed Claire's stunning announcement were a whirlwind of transformation, not just for her but for the entire community. Jefferson High, once a stage for her humiliation, became the backdrop for her remarkable rise. The media spotlight illuminated every corner of Claire's life, from heartfelt interviews to profiles in local papers, portraying her not merely as a shy girl or a hidden heir, but as a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt invisible or powerless. Madison Harper's downfall was swift and unmistakable. Once the undisputed queen of the school, her arrogance crumbled under public scrutiny. Those who had stood silently by during her reign of cruelty now distanced themselves, reluctant to be linked to someone caught in disgrace. Madison's attempts to dismiss Claire's story as a joke or a desperate desire for attention only deepened her own fall from grace. The social hierarchy that had once seemed so rigid fractured under the weight of truths long ignored. In a special assembly convened for the entire school, Claire was invited, not just as the girl who had endured torment, but as a leader, a voice for kindness and change. Standing at the podium, her posture regal yet genuine, Claire shared words that echoed far beyond the walls of Jefferson High. "We all have stories hidden beneath the surface," she said softly. "And sometimes those stories carry more strength than anyone can imagine. No one deserves to be silenced or shamed for who they are." Her message resonated deeply with students who had themselves felt marginalized. Walls built on cruelty and exclusion began to crumble, replaced by tentative bridges of understanding. Madison, forced to confront her own behavior, issued a public apology. Whether out of genuine remorse or self-preservation, it was a small step toward healing the wounds of the past. Claire, with unexpected grace, accepted the gesture, not as a sign of weakness, but as a testament to her growth. Beyond the school, the community rallied around Claire, fascinated and inspired by her story. Invitations to speak at local events and charitable organizations arrived, each an opportunity for Claire to amplify her message of resilience and self-acceptance. The shy girl who once hid in shadows was now a radiant beacon, encouraging others to find their voices. Yet this newfound life was not without its challenges. Balancing the ordinary struggles of teenage life with the extraordinary demands of her heritage was a delicate dance. Claire met with diplomats, learned about international protocols, and prepared for a future she had never expected to face. Through it all, she remained grounded by the memory of who she was before any title, an ordinary girl who had fought to be seen and heard. One afternoon, during a quiet moment at the park, Claire reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain of humiliation, the fear of rejection, the burden of secrecy, all had forged a path to self-discovery. She realized that true nobility was not conferred by birthright alone, but earned through kindness, courage, and integrity. Looking up at the sky painted with soft hues of sunset, Claire's heart swelled with gratitude and determination. She had learned that the world often judges by appearances, but beneath those surfaces lie depths of strength waiting to be revealed. Her story was proof that vulnerability could be a source of power, and that standing tall after falling was the greatest triumph of all. As she prepared to embrace a future woven with both challenges and triumphs, Claire extended a hand to those still searching for their place. Everyone deserves to be seen, she thought, and sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead us to the most beautiful destinations. Have you ever witnessed someone transform before your eyes, shatter expectations, and rewrite their own story? Claire's journey reminds us all that within each of us lies the power to rise anew, to reclaim our identities, and to inspire the world around us. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next video.